1. Alright, so Esther 1, we are diving in and we're going to paint the picture here, okay? So the year is about 483 BC, okay? The Persian Empire is the superpower of the world, okay? So they're like the America of the time, okay? So we are at the Persian Empire. King Ahasuerus, whom the Greek historians call Xerxes. So if you've ever heard of Xerxes the First, this is the same guy, just has a different name in Greek or Persia, okay? So he's sitting on the throne, and he is a very, very proud and powerful man. His empire stretching from India to Ethiopia and covering 127 different provinces, okay? So imagine that kind of reach that one man would have without phones, planes, the internet, any of that. And he is in control of this vast empire, okay? And we're going to see what that kind of power can do to a man, okay? So we're going to start in Esther, and I love Esther because Esther is such a different book from the rest of the Bible. You can kind of literally read into it once upon a time, okay? Because it's this kind of historical narrative about a real event. It's kind of like historical fiction, but it is an actual event, but it kind of starts out that way as we're going to tell you this incredible historical story, okay? So Esther 1:1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in case you didn't know which one we're talking about, it's that guy, okay? In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the royal throne in Susa, the citadel, that just basically means like capital, okay, the capital of his vast empire. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Mede, and the nobles and the governors and the princes were before him. Okay? While he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So who wants to do the math on 180 days? How many months is that? 6 months.
I'm getting there.
6 months. Would you love to attend a party that lasted for 6 months? Okay, that was so much party.
I feel like I'd be over it.
It'd be pretty over by 6 months, right? All right, so right out of the gate, we meet the king, Ahasuerus. Okay, so Esther doesn't even start with Esther. We start with King Ahasuerus. But he wasn't just any king. He inherited this vast empire from his father, Darius the First. And if you remember Darius, he is the last king that we meet in Daniel. Okay, so this is now his son, King Ahasuerus. He is only 32 years old when he gets this vast empire. He's 32, okay?
When did it party for 100?
Yeah, party card at 32, right? But we're going to see why he decided to throw this big party. So archaeologists have uncovered this palace in Susa where all of this unfolds. They found it. They know exactly where it is, exactly what it looks like. Okay?
That's incredible.
Yeah, they discovered it. Okay? So the Greek historian Herodotus, he talks a lot about Ahasuerus, okay? And he's only writing about 25 years after Ahasuerus dies, so he kind of knows a lot of it. This is how he described him: as the tallest and most handsome Persian of all. Okay? But as we'll see, good looks do not equal good character. Okay? Ahasuerus was proud, impulsive, and absolutely intoxicated with power. Okay? By the 3rd year of his reign, he is going to prepare to get what his heart craves the most. He is going after Greece, the other superpower of the world at that time. And this is his longing and the reason for the 6-month party. Okay, so you see, it wasn't just about showing off all of his gold cups and everything that was happening. He was buttering up the nobles and the military to support him in his going after Greece, his campaign after Greece. So have you ever seen someone try to use their power to impress others like that? Never, right? No one would ever use their power and circumstance to kind of show off, right? And how do you think all of that wealth and all of that power that was just handed to a 32-year-old is going to affect his judgment? Okay? He gets handed all of this at 32 and has to make decisions. So we're going to put him back in this historical context. Let's read on what happens in verse 5. And when these days were complete, so after the 6 months, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. Okay, so these 6 months were for all of the rich people, the military, the higher up people. And then for 7 days, he's going to go throw a party for everybody else. So everybody else is invited into the gardens to have this 7-day party.
Like the common people?
The common people. So just everybody else is welcome to come to this party, okay? So the author goes on and tells us there were white cotton curtains and violet hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on mosaic pavement and porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. You're kind of getting an idea. It's a really fancy party. Okay. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to the edict. There is no compulsion. For the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desires. Okay? Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. Okay? So we have actually 2 parties going on at the same time for 7 days. In the garden, all the men were invited of the city. And inside, all the women are having a party inside the palace. Okay? So 2 different parties going on for a week. All right? So after the 6 months of showing off, we have this party where everybody gets to come here. And it's a scene. We have all these colorful banners and all of these different things that they're showing off. Okay? And it makes a point to tell us that they're drinking out of individual glasses. Now, we would look at that and say that's kind of like, white trash, of like, don't have matching glasses, right? This was actually what Persians do. They would craft individual vessels, and that was part of their culture, was how to make these vessels unique and individualized. So it was actually part of their royalty, was to have all these individual different glasses. So it's kind of interesting, the different cultures that we see here.
Jenifer, is there any reason why the men and women weren't feasting together?
Yeah, so it's kind of more of the Persian culture, is that they separated out and feasted very differently. So the men were allowed to do what the men did, and the women were kind of having what we had yesterday, as just for the women, right? And they did not intermingle, okay? So there's also another unusual order here. Typically when a party was going on, if the king took a drink, you took a drink, okay? So you kind of watched. Every time the king had a drink, you had to take a drink. Okay, that was the tradition. But
so
here,
everybody was the same drunk.
Everybody was the same drunk. You were not more or less drunk than the king. Okay, so everybody was the same amount of drunk. Except here, the king tells the servants, do whatever the people want. So they can drink it more or less, whatever they want. Why do you think he's doing that?
So they get more drunk.
He's trying to get people buttered up. He's going, just let them drink however much they want to drink. They don't have to follow me. They can decide for themselves. Okay, so he's trying to butter up these now common people. We've got the royals and the nobilities on our side. Now we're trying to butter up the common people. Okay, so while the men are partying out in the palace gardens, Queen Vashti and all the women are inside having a very different party. Okay, so let's go on to verse 10 and find out what happens. Okay. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded, here we go, 7 eunuchs, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbana, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zithar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. So here's where the party shifts.
Are they not married? Like king, queen married?
They are married.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this is his wife.
Okay.
Probably one of several, but this is the head queen. She is the queen. She's the only queen. Yes. Sorry, I know. It's for military purposes. It's how you keep peace. You married the daughters of other kings and you kept peace with them. So it was very military. Alright, so here's where the story shifts. On the seventh day, we're told that the king's heart was merry with wine. That's just a very biblical, polite way to say that he was drunk out of his mind. Okay? Probably couldn't even walk straight. So he decides to send for his queen. Alright? So the Jewish tradition suggests that this wasn't a very polite invitation, that she was expected to present herself in probably an immodest way. Okay, remember, we have a garden full of drunk men, and she was to be presented possibly only in her royal crown and nothing else. Okay? But even if not, just that she was invited to a drunken party with a bunch of men.
I'm sorry. If I don't say my face, then I'm working on it.
I'm still enjoying your face.
That is the Jewish tradition, that she was asked to come immodestly, and it was maybe perhaps why she denied coming. But even if that, there's a garden full of drunk men, and she was asked to be displayed for all of her beauty. Okay? So she, in this moment, decides to do something very bold. She says no to the king, who is in charge of almost the entire world at this point. Okay? And Jewish tradition also suggests that this Queen Vashti is the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? So she might have felt a little bit of pride in, I'm not going to be on display for you. This is my lineage. I am the granddaughter of King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? So whether pride, personal conviction, or even just dignity, she says no. And she is not a believer in Yahweh. So she shows courage standing on her own. Okay? So can you think of a time in your life where you had the decision to do a right or dignified thing that might have put you at risk? Because you have to remember the risks that she's taking. She is saying no to the most powerful man in the world. Okay? You don't say no to the most powerful man in the world. She did. Okay? So let's go on to verse 13. Then the king said to his wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment. And the men next to him being, so there's another list of men, okay? Every time I want you to see a list during this book of Esther, think of somebody naming off the 7 dwarfs, okay? It was to this level of ridiculousness of why they're having the names there. They hold no significance. They're just there to kind of amuse the people who are listening, okay? So it would be kind of tongue twisters for the Hebrew to read these Persian names, okay? So Karshina, Shithar, Admatha, Tarshish, Mers, Marcina, and Mamukin. I love Mamukin's name. He becomes very important. They are the 7 princes of Persia and Mede, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. Okay? According to the law, which has been done to Queen Vashti, because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs. Okay? Verse 1. Okay, keep going. Then Mamukin said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the people who were in all the province of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all the women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Mede, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the law of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be repealed, that Queen Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all of his kingdom, for it is vast, all women will give honor to the husbands, high and low alike. Well, you can imagine, the king's not very happy when he sends for his wife and she does not come. He is furious, he is humiliated, okay? And he decides to consult his advisors. And we're told that they are wise men. Like who? Daniel. We're right after Daniel. Y'all, we're within a couple years of Daniel's death. So they still have wise men who are giving advice to the king of Persia and Mede, okay? Well, these are so-called wise men. We'll give them that title. The so-called wise men, okay? These are magicians and counselors and those who know the time and history and stars, okay? These are the advisors. And they give the king some advice. Well, Queen Vashti didn't come. So let's make a royal decree. She is never to come in your sight ever again. Okay? So this is a big decision. When you have to make this big decision, where do you normally turn? You turn to your advisors, your wise people in your life. You turn to God. You turn to your own instincts, because remember, he's drunk out of his mind and drunk on power, and he doesn't know what to do. What should I do? And he turns to these wise men. Okay? So one of them, Memucan, he speaks up, and he sees this as a national crisis. This is not just about Vashti saying no. This involves the entire kingdom. Everyone's going down because of what she did. This is a national crisis.
All the women are going to up.
Yes, they're going to be an uproar. They're going to revolt.
The beginning of feminism.
The beginning of feminism. These women are going to revolt. We've got to cut it off in the past.
Meanwhile, he's cut his nose off to spite his face.
Right. This is Memucan going, we've got to handle this situation because this is a national crisis. He's also drunk out of his mind.
Right.
Yeah.
It will never end.
It will never end. It's not going to end right here because we're all the women of the kingdom of the city are in the palace hearing Vashti say no, and all the men are outside and she's not coming. Okay, so we have a lot of eyewitnesses here, and Memucan's going, they're going to go tell everyone else, and this is going to spread. Okay, so he's seeing this as a virus. It's going to spread through the kingdom. We cannot let the women win, right? Okay, so here's his plan. Banish her from your presence forever and bring someone better. Read more obedient. Okay? That's how he sees better. A more obedient woman. Someone better than Queen Vashti. Alright? You don't need her king. We'll find you somebody better. Alright? So this would supposedly prevent all wives across the entire empire from disrespecting their husbands. We're going to make it a law. We're going to legislate respect.
How does that work?
Imagine that.
It doesn't. They already got it in their heads. They're all going to grow some good
well
moves.
over here.
Can I introduce you to the word irony? They are going to legislate respect because the king didn't get it from his own wife. So we're going to now make it law. You have to respect your husband. Can you imagine in the far reaches of the 127 provinces, this letter showing up and being read? You now must respect your husband above all else. And they go, what happened at that party?
Can you imagine like being the woman that gets it and the husband's not home and
Burn it.
Can you imagine the men going, yeah, right on, and the women going, what happened at that party? What in the world happened at that party? Right? So true respect cannot be legislated or demanded. And yet, this was the rule of the king. Alright? So let's think about how mutual respect is essential in any relationship, not just between a husband and a wife. Okay? But remember, Memucan thinks that this is going to infect the entire nation. Okay? And he's going to cut it off at the pass. But let's be honest, when was the last time we tried to control a situation? Very similar, right? You think that it's going to grow outside of your control, so you try to hold on to control. And how does that usually turn out?
Not very well.
Not very well. Yeah. The king has a lot of confused women and men on his hands at this point.
and they're all drunk.
They're all drunk.
That was a good choice.
But tomorrow morning when they wake up and the wall's still there, they have to deal with the consequences of it. Okay, so let's find out the consequences of what happened. Verse 21. So this advice pleased the king, I'm sure it did, and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal providences, to every province in its own script, to every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household and speak according to the language of his people. So they sent out this law in every way possible so that everyone would understand very clearly communicating to every level, language, and people in 127 provinces. The man is supposed to be the master of the household. Meanwhile, the king is not even master of his own household.
So can you just not to get married and then be the master of your own house?
Which is that? I didn't hear her. She just like not get married to the own like leader of your own house.
At that time,
Work that way at that time.
at that time, you really didn't have that.
I'm not so
Unfortunately, that was not really your
especially in this
choice.
day and age.
Mm-hmm.
But here is now this law, in effect, demanding respect. I'm sure it did not go over well in the households of the Persian Empire, and probably a lot of confusion. Probably a lot of what now? Like, now you're giving them all this power because you didn't have the power to demand this woman, okay? So the king, who's eager to save face, he agrees to this advice and he does what he's supposed to, he does what is required, okay? And history shows us that this king Ahasuerus was often very rash and unreasonable. This is the same man, according to our historian, says that he ordered the sea, the water, the ocean, we're all on the same page with that word, okay, to be chained and whipped because it tore down one of his bridges.
How's that work for him?
Right. Historical documentation that this man ordered the water to be chained and whipped because it took down one of his bridges. Okay? Same guy.
Let's not
Same
blame
guy.
the people who built the bridge.
No, yeah. We're gonna chain and whip the ocean.
Or the weather.
Or the weather. No.
We're good.
Chain and whip the
I mean,
ocean.
he was Xerxes, you know what I mean? Like, should know and control it.
Yeah. So I want you to hold on to that mental picture of this man. This is the man in Esther, okay?
He is
So-
32.
He's 32. Yes, he is
Still
32.
does that quite not quite developed.
His might be real behind. It's usually by 25 that stuff.
Yeah, he's a little behind. Alright, so the decree gets sent out in every language across the empire, declaring every man to be master of their own household. The king and his inability to command his own household. Okay? So isn't it fascinating how the story of Esther doesn't even start with Esther? We have this battle going on between Vashti and Ahasuerus. And Esther is nowhere to be found in the entire first chapter. Okay? It all starts with power, pride, human decisions. And yet, behind the scenes, if we pull back the curtain, God is weaving this incredible pathway and plan. Vashti's courage and Ahasuerus' pride and Memucan's fear, none of it is a surprise to God. He is seeing all of this go down, and it's not a surprise to him, because he's going to use every choice of human free will, even though it's flawed, to accomplish his divine providence. Okay? So the same is true for us. Our choices matter, but God's always at work. Even in the moments where we don't see him written on the page. We've gone now through 22 verses, and we don't see God's name mentioned at all. And you won't find it in the book of Esther. But sometimes God allows human pride and these power plays, and even the foolishness of Memucan to set the stage, because at the end of chapter 1, we have a vacant throne of the queen. She is now banished from being a part of the royal family. And that is going to open a door for another woman to take that throne, a woman that God is preparing and choosing. But can I tell you this, to go with the theme of waiting that we heard from Pastor Chris, 3 years go by between chapter 1 and chapter 2. So Queen Vashti's throne sits vacant for 3 years.
Just because nobody wants in that mess.
Right? I wouldn't want to sit in that throne. Not after that. But it isn't for a while until the king's temper kind of calms down and he makes a decision, which we're going to learn about next week. But that throne sits vacant for 3 years while God is preparing the perfect woman to take it. So, that's Esther 1.